Imagine yourself heading into a meeting that you called for. You're very, very excited to work on this big project with the rest of your team. However, when it's time to call for ideas, the whole room falls silent. Your discussion slowly falls into limbo because no one turns on their cameras or no one has the courage to speak up. Personally, these kinds of meetings are the ones I dread the most. So the question is, how do we actually avoid these kinds of situations? My name is Aaron. I study business administration and accountancy. I'm the leader of my organization, but most importantly, I'm a highly stressed out college student like the rest of you guys.
Obviously, there are many reasons why there's a bad meeting. But here you will hear principles that will help you pay attention to relational dynamics that will make you and your teammates get more engaged in your meetings. This is JR. I'm a youth mentor, a project manager, and an inspirational speaker. This is Ain't a Boss. Thanks for tuning in.
Right. Hi, JR. Welcome back. If I can welcome you back to another episode of our podcast. So, how have you been so far? Yeah, lately.
Good. Really good. I'm going to be on vacation next week, so I'm really looking forward to that. On the other hand, I know that you have an exam in a few hours, so
wish me luck.
God bless you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you a very curious question. And you might laugh at this, you might find this funny. But Speaking on the topic of meetings, first and foremost, what's probably the weirdest or most out there thing you've done in an online meeting?
Face-to-face meetings, there's a ton. Like, I've probably led many
sure.
meetings. Myself being the weirdest person in the room. But this one, I won't forget this. We were on a meeting with different leaders that I was with. So the one actually leading the meeting was not showing his camera at first. And then when we started the meeting, he showed up. He showed up with shades, topless, and a beach background.
Oh no.
Sort of like, what the heck is happening? And yeah, I thought we had a productive meeting. Everybody loosened up, but that was the price.
Well, you know what they say. Online meetings are a time for new things to be tested out, new backgrounds, new shades even. Yeah, I was just saying, we're getting into this topic of meetings, and you already put a very interesting piece out there about what could transpire in a meeting. Right. But I just wanted to say first and foremost that this part of online life, or this part of the new normal, is actually very close to my heart. And you said earlier that I'm gonna have an exam soon. That's actually correct. But most of my day, right, in this new normal, is spent in front of the camera. May it be in Zoom meetings like this, what we're doing, talking to each other. Whether it be meeting with my friends, doing ACADS, meeting in my orgs. The word meeting never seems to already get out of there. It's been a natural part. It's been the biggest part of my life, to be honest, in this online setup.
And I think, Aaron, a lot of people are predicting even that hopefully pandemic ends pretty soon.
Sure.
But even if it ends, the setting of online meetings would still be there. The hybrid combination of face-to-face and online gatherings would be there.
Meetings are probably the places where we do most of our interaction nowadays. I know it's not only the truth when it comes to students like me, but also for working guys like you. I think meetings, really, the bottom line here is meetings can do a lot in producing a positive, or in the case of the opposite, a negative impact on how your team is going to work.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would overlook the quality of meetings.
For sure.
Because they're looking at like the results for the projects that we're supposed to do. For example, like you have a report for your class. You don't necessarily pay attention to your meetings because you're just too agit looking at your projects or the reports that you need to do. So people don't pay attention too much on meetings, but there's actually a lot of things that could be addressed when you do your meetings well. Anyway, we're talking about meetings that don't suck, but
Yeah.
I mean, you and I have experienced a lot of like meetings that have gone probably south, and we're not very happy about them. Yeah.
One of the things that I experience a lot when it comes to large group setups, and it actually happens when you're just a spectator in a meeting. When I say that, I think experiences a lot when, again, there's lots of people, but more so when they require attendance, but you feel like you're really not needed in the meeting. You don't have a purpose as to why you're there. Most of you in the meeting don't actually have anything substantial to do there. It almost makes me feel like, oh, I could be doing this asynchronous in an asynchronous setup. Why bother to just attend in the first place? Yeah. So I guess that's one point. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of your classmates or the people that you work with would have experienced that, probably not with you, but I would even experience it leading meetings, and then people would come to me and like say, you could have just sent an email and not called for a meeting if that, I mean, we could just have like sent a note.
Another aspect which I think can help us to avoid meetings that don't suck is actually that avoiding that experience of having a dead crowd. I think you know what this means. It's pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, it's quite frustrating being in that.
I hate
but
it.
I have to admit also, it's also very tempting to be wanting to be part of that dead crowd when everyone's not responding.
Yep, to be fair, like I hate it, but if I'm not leading the meeting, I would also just like somehow drift into that of not participating. A lot of people, including myself, sometimes I'm in a meeting on a Zoom, but I'm actually doing something else, like maybe like clipping my nails or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I can't blame the people who are in the meeting.
For sure.
If they're really distracted and not really participating, but it's actually quite difficult to have a meeting like that, and that's why I don't like it.
Yeah. One thing that's pretty interesting to me, based on my experiences being a leader before the pandemic and now during the pandemic, is that these problems, if I may say, they're not just here because we're experiencing an online setup. And in that same route, these bad meetings which are caused by these problems are not just bad because they're done online. Am I making sense? Yeah.
You're saying that it's not only because we're online that we experience meetings that really suck.
Yeah.
Even if they're face-to-face, there can be bad meetings. But I think, am I right? Like, they're just magnified mainly because we're online. Yeah.
I remember this one instance when I was in a face-to-face meeting before, and we had that dead crowd in there. But I remember just putting or slapping the back of the person next to me. He was my friend, so just for some context, I was he allowed me to do that.
I think your friend talked to me afterwards. No, I'm kidding.
But I just did that. I patted him on the back right there. Hey, try to answer, and then we got that into we got the discussion flowing, at least from our insights, from both our insights. But I guess going back to your point, it's just magnified because of the online setup. You can't do those things. You can't read body language when you're in an online setup. People can turn off their cameras. But I guess one thing that we can do, we can learn from both face-to-face and online setups. The solution for these online meetings that suck, they're not limited to just working around the digital screen or the digital setup that we have right now. And I believe there are ways to run more effective, more efficient, engaging meetings, virtual.
I think we can talk about certain principles. So I'll share some principles addressing certain problems that you've shared earlier. But there's a ton of scenarios that we can think of that really make meetings suck. Everybody would probably have an experience of that. But why don't we just talk about... Yeah, exactly. Why don't we just talk about 3 principles here that would probably give us some guidance on how to apply them practically in your situation or in other people's situation, especially those who are actually listening to us. So, yeah.
Sounds good.
one principle that I'd like to share here is the responsibility rule. And that means basically, if you want to have better meetings, we want to make sure that everybody knows their role. Sometimes, even if you tell them they're the one leading, okay, we're going to brainstorm. But if I come to the meeting, like say, what am I going to be brainstorming about? What's my responsibility in this topic? If those things are not clear, then it would be very hard for people to participate. And then their tendency is to be passive. So there's a Harvard Business Review article on how to participate in meetings. And there's a phenomenon, the diffusion of responsibility. Basically, it says big word, if everybody's responsible, then no one's responsible. So if the responsibility is dissipated, so they're having like a test or a research, like if somebody gets a heart attack in a train, the more people who are in the train, the less likely that people would actually respond, because they're gonna think, oh, someone's gonna handle that anyway. Like in the train, so in the meeting, if everybody's working on the same thing, for example, like the 6 of you guys in the meeting, and then you're all working on brainstorming, so some of them would probably think that, oh, he's probably gonna think what I'm gonna be thinking, so I'm probably just not gonna think too much or look for more ideas. Definitely, you need to identify first what's your goal for the meeting, right? And then come up with several roles for each member for them to really own their responsibility. So, for example, like if you want them to brainstorm on something, like, okay, one would be maybe use a hat that will think about like in a perspective of our clients or the participants of this organization. So you'll handle that. So brainstorm in their perspective. One will be like thinking about like our partners or the other organizations that will be working with us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so creating roles out of roles. That's what I got from that. Just making sure that each person is doing something a little bit different from the other in order to avoid that diffusion of responsibility.
But I'd like to encourage you and everybody who will be listening to us that if you're on a train and someone gets a heart attack, just go, jump right in.
Please help them. Yeah.
And of course, it's the same with the meetings. But that's very normal. And I think we can't blame everybody in that situation. But I think we can just like, if that's you, encourage yourself and to really decide, I'm going to participate. And I'll be one of those first people who will actually respond.
Right. Great.
You know that everybody has a role or responsibility, but it should be meaningful enough. So somehow we've already touched on like what I've shared kanina. But it will be good for us to really make sure that everyone has like sees the value of their role there. And it's not just like, he knows that everybody needs to have a role and he's just giving me something, but this won't really like account to something because
just for the sake of it.
Exactly. It's not factored in the decision making or eventually he's gonna decide what to do anyway, and then everything will be scrapped. So really make sure that the responsibility has meaning.
Right.
Okay. So in the same Harvard Business Review article, there's also another rule or another mindset, which is like a nowhere to hide rule for them. So basically, this is a mindset that you're really gonna give it to them, and they can't really just like be in the background. So it's either
they have to be out there.
It's either, again, you give them like very specific role that only them who can actually fulfill it, or you break them into groups use the different functions that will really get their engagement.
Yeah.
So basically, have them talk, and they will be
Mm-hmm.
forced to actually give their input and whatnot. So what I normally do is I have everybody like, okay, this is something. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? But the more weight that you put into like, I need you to say something about this because this has stake on like maybe your committee or something, that will give them also meaning.
Just wanted to ask, interject on there. How do you do that? For sure, like different members have different capabilities, but especially for those who are new to the team or probably just easing into the team dynamics, how do you create meaningful responsibility for newer people, or for lack of a better term, for those who are a bit shy than the other members of the team?
Of this principle really needs priming also. So even before you start the meeting, you should be telling them this is what's gonna happen. Again, come up with an agenda in mind and tell them, and then have them be primed of that. This is what's gonna happen. We normally do this in the meetings. If you're new here, so this is our culture in our meetings, or at least when I lead meetings, this is how I would want our meetings to go, because I really value what you guys would want to say, and here are your roles. So things like that would help. So and then of course there are different scenarios that would add up to what you're asking. Then I'm gonna say the way I would normally answer questions with this, which is it depends on the situation. Okay. Another thing that this principle would help us avoid, another problem that we normally have, is when a meeting is dominated by a personality. It's either because someone just like talks a lot, or who's actually an expert, so everybody will gravitate to that person. So some people would call it a halo effect. So we want to avoid that also, because if somebody is there and he's just gonna dominate the conversation, then the tendency for everybody would be like, let's have her just do the talking because she makes sense, and we don't need our meeting anyway, or you guys don't need me anymore anyway. So, but we don't want that, because again, in a meeting we value everybody. Like a podcast by Brene Brown with Priya Parker. So we're gonna put them in the show notes also later on. So what they would suggest is to actually have them write their thoughts first, and then have everybody share it. So instead of like one person will just talk, at the same time. So it's either like post-its or do it in Slido maybe, or other functions that you can actually use in a meeting online. And then have everybody share at the same time, and then build a consensus from there. Or you as a leader would actually like pick out different thoughts. That way you're avoiding like having one person. But of course the principle would avoid that. So if you just follow the principle, you can do different ways how to avoid the halo effect. But you really want to give power to everybody and say like, hey, this is your role and this is meaningful. I value what you have to say. That gives a person already a power. And naturally, the halo effect will be avoided.
On a per meeting basis, the exact solution still depends. But thanks for bringing up the principle, JR.
Yeah, and that's why we're sharing principles, because like, I don't know what you want your meetings are for, what you want your meetings to achieve, but the principles will help you get there, because you can just apply it in different ways. And you might actually have different tricks that I don't know, because of like say the technology that you have, that you guys use. For many of the students here, Zoom would probably, or even Google Meet, because they're normally like free in their universities. But there are other meeting platforms that are much more sophisticated, but you gotta pay for them, So and with that, there will be different ways how to apply this principle.
So I just remembered something related to what I shared earlier about my leadership of a 6-man team in our finance org. I just, based on what you said, I see myself actually in the shoes of the guy with a halo, or the one with a halo introducing the halo effect. Yeah, as a leader, as the leader of that group, I tended to have that responsibility. I felt like I had the responsibility to, influence at least the earlier meetings
Yep.
by a long shot, not really paying attention or giving lots of talking opportunities to the other also by other members, or at least trying to make the discussion flow by interjecting at any given
Yeah.
point in time where I feel like the energy has died down. So it's just curious to revisit that. And I
Right.
wish I could have learned about this principle earlier, but it's a learning process.
Yeah, of course. Always something to learn. And it's also very natural for the members in the meeting to defer to the leader.
For sure.
So that's why it's actually a very common phenomenon in meetings. Like, so the leader will just like keep on
Right.
talking, and then naturally the members will just like, okay, so we believe you, you're our leader anyway, so do that. This is also actually something that's quite close to me, because wherever I go, whether I'm leading the meeting or I'm participating, I would tend to be very vocal, very opinionated. Sometimes it's good, sometimes I'm disrupting, and it's actually counterproductive. So I have to watch out for that. But the leader has to also like make sure that, okay, how can we make JR not talk a lot, or talk when it's strategic for him to talk,
when it's good to share.
Yes. Yeah. So somehow I would actually appreciate the leaders in our meeting who would actually put me to place like JR. We'll have you later. But let's talk. Let's have the others also talk about what they have to say. Let me just correct myself. I just said earlier that the halo effect we got from Priya Parker and Brene Brown's conversation. That's not quite true. I got that actually from her book, Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. Yeah. So, but later on, I'm going to share about also something that Priya Parker and Brene Brown shared in their podcast. So just to correct myself there.
Don't worry, you're forgiven, bro. It's all good. It's all good. But anyways,
thank you.
We were already talking about roles. We're done talking about meaningful responsibility. Is there something else, or are we still missing something from principles that can actually help us?
Well, a lot, because there's a lot of principles
for sure.
But just for the sake of like our conversation, maybe the third principle that I would like to share is, which is also very important to me because I'm also just learning about it recently, maybe in the past few years that I've been mentoring and leading groups and meetings and organizations. So I wish I really learned this when I was in college, because this would probably have saved me and a lot of relationships. But oh well, such is life. So this principle is an open and safe space principle.
Yeah.
In your meetings. So basically, when you take an active role, or when you give your members an active role, they should be free to do it. So a lot of people would be tentative, like, yeah, I have this role, but I always feel like I'm going to be judged. Or is he really actually going to listen to me? Or he or she is just like giving me this role for the sake of my participation. But really, I don't know. So the principle is, give them a role, give them meaningful responsibility in the meetings, but give them an open and safe space also.
Yeah.
For that role to be carried out.
The words open and safe space are not new to me. We've been talking about that in school, in business, in business school, facilitating leader, being a better leader. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think we talked about it in the first episode with Simon Sinek on like the safe circle. Yeah. Anyways.
Anyways, I just thought of a good experience or an experience close to my heart, which actually helped me open up to the members in my team. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
actually the leader of this team, but we're working with a corporate firm, consulting
Mm-hmm.
firm in a project. And one of the things that we usually do when we have internal meetings right there is we have an exit question, as we'd like to call it within the team. So just
Yeah.
anything under the sun, anything you can share about yourself, someone will ask the whole team the same question, and you just go ahead, share about yourself, whatever you feel
Yeah.
comfortable. And yeah, we just take turns doing that, bouncing off one
Mm-hmm.
another, sharing laughs, sharing snides here and there. Just kidding, but I think
We
it
do
really
that a
helped
lot in
us.
our meetings.
Yeah. But anyways, I think it really went a long way in establishing a good environment, at least for now. At least we're still in the
Yeah.
process of working with each
Okay.
other, but I think that went a long way. So just a side note based on what you said about safe and
Yeah.
open spaces. Yeah.
Well, good on you that you're doing that. Good luck and on your
Thank you.
project and the rest of your time together as a team. We can talk about that also in our mentoring sesh.
Sure. Looking
Anyways,
forward.
but which you actually said something very important. That's a good component of this open and safe
Right.
space, which is vulnerability. If you're leading, you should model this, but everybody should have a sense also of a certain kind of vulnerability in the
Mm-hmm.
team. Uh, I'm not talking about like share your secrets, all your sins, and
Oh no.
all your biggest problems in the world. It's not necessarily like that. You don't want to compromise yourself also by sharing too much.
Yeah.
But Brene Brown in her book also defined vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure.
Mm,
If you're in that situation, then there's vulnerability. A
right.
recognition of that just makes a big difference. Just to tell people, like, hey, I don't know much about this. This is
Mm-hmm.
uncertain for me. Or like, hey, I'm having a hard time
I need help. Yeah.
wrapping my mind around this. This is such a risky thing for our organization. I need help.
Yeah.
Or actually, like, I don't feel so good about this, or I'm not really excited about this.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth doing. So somehow identifying your feelings and
Yeah.
how you can actually be real about what's happening would be
Right.
very, very important. Needless to say, I think it's also important for the relationship of the people in the meeting to have some things to talk about other than the meeting.
Yeah. For sure.
Which is like that also gives you certain like vulnerability, like, oh, Aaron, he's actually like a person also. He's not a robot.
Thank you.
Like
Thank you.
like when sometimes in our meetings you'd share like you just played basketball with
Right.
this person, and then you lost, and somehow like, oh, okay, so that's a side of Aaron that he's not that perfect.
Yeah.
But it's necessarily about the meeting, but it helps the whole team get to know you as well. So that's vulnerability as a big component of an open and safe space. And it gives us like a supportive environment. So I'm just gonna quote here John Curris. He published an article, a study on authentic leadership, on vulnerability, the key to authentic leadership in this pandemic. So actually, it's pretty recent, 2020. And he says, fostering a supportive environment that values and cares for its team members is the necessary foundation for a thriving and engaged organization. By demonstrating vulnerability with kindness added, you are creating a safe space for others to communicate and collaborate, and in some cases, coach up. That's from his journal. So, makes sense, no? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The risks
Correct.
involved can actually go a long way, not just improving yourself or asking for help from others, but also encouraging others to do the same. And allowing them to feel like you can do this also. You can be imperfect.
Correct.
As well.
Correct. So the environment that Chris is talking about here, some people would say that this is, some people would call this psychological safety. I'm
Right.
sorry, like I'm pouring a lot of big words here. We can put it in the show notes anyway for I mean, we talk about this anyway,
Right.
on the side when we talk about our meetings also. So some of these things naman na. But for some of our listeners, maybe, I'm sorry if you're hearing a lot of big words, we're going to put them in the show notes. But I think they're very helpful. So I got this from Amy Edmondson's TED Talk. And then she's saying, which is very true. I don't know if you have stories about this, but no one wakes up in the morning going to the meetings and would say like, okay, I'm gonna go to a meeting and I'm looking forward to be incompetent, ignorant, negative, and intrusive. Meaning, like, you don't go to a meeting thinking, I want to be a dumb ass.
Yeah.
So yeah. So, but it's a bit because of that, people would tend to like be tentative in meetings, not to participate, not to ask questions, not trying to challenge the status quo, basically not to speak up because they're afraid.
Right.
And therefore, it's going to be very, very hard for the meeting to thrive and to achieve what you want to achieve if that's the case. So we want to have a psychological safety in terms of the environment so that there's really an open and safe space for ideas, collaboration, and even like warning signs that sometimes would come from different members who would actually say, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you said that. Otherwise, we're falling into a trap.
Right. Makes sense. So you asked me to prepare some tips. I actually thought of some while you were talking about the principles. So I'll just get right into it. And for the first tip that I'd probably share or I'd probably want to use myself is to really put a name in all of our meetings. So name your meetings. That's tip number 1. And I believe just doing this, creating what a meeting is for, telling your members what a meeting is for, whether you name a meeting as a brainstorming meeting, you name it as a planning meeting, you name it as a fun meeting or a meeting where you don't do anything, but
blue sky.
Hopefully blue sky meeting.
Yeah.
I guess just putting that, it might sound simple, but it goes a long way in making sure that your members know what they're going to bring to the table. For example, maybe in brainstorm meetings, they'll need to bring ideas. Well, I need to bring ideas when I go into a brainstorming meeting. For a planning meeting, it's strategies or vision. So it's a very simple tip, but I believe like the simple act of naming your meetings, telling what that meeting is all about, can go a long way.
Yep, that's actually a pretty good one. If I may add, it would also be good to have a name also for the roles that you're going to give to them. So that might add to like, okay, you're going to name the meetings, but also name the certain roles or tasks that you want your members to do. Yeah.
Yes. Second tip. I'd like to say that this tip is probably a personal tip, really close to my heart. We call it strategic touch bases, or in Filipino, strategic kamustahans.
Kamustahan?
So, the way I'd like to frame it is just to check up on each member or encourage or ask questions that would facilitate open sharing, intimacy, trust, teamwork, dynamics, stuff like those. And there are lots of ways to do this, whether it be doing these touch bases as a group, doing it on an individual level with some of your leaders, some of your members as well. Just asking things like what the highlight or low light of the week was. Someone in the group or in the meeting or in the team that they'd like to work for or work with or learn about from. So asking these questions gets them to open up. Going back again to our third principle of vulnerability, I think it helps. But it just gives leaders, or it just gives even members, a sense of how everyone's doing, making them more not just vulnerable but more in tune to how they can help, how they can contribute with that in mind. So just
you
to
actually do this quite well, Aaron.
Thank you.
No, I'm serious. Like when you lead meetings, you intentionally ask people how they're doing, and you actually keep track of what they've shared even before. So you have follow through questions and like, oh, how's this person that you worked with? I think that's very good. So people would really work with you because they realize that this person, my leader, cares about me and not just what I'm capable of doing in my work.
So moving on, shall we go to the third and final tip?
I'm excited to hear.
I think this is the hardest to do at least for me personally.
For you?
Involving your team. Tip number 3, involving your team in as early as goal setting. So from the start, from setting that vision, the purpose of not just every meeting, but the purpose of the entire team itself, what you're going to do, setting expectations and involving them in discussions, engaging them, allowing them to contribute from the very start. I think that goes a long way in facilitating better meetings moving forward. When at the very beginning, all of your members know what they're there for, how they can contribute, giving each other the opportunity to just contribute from the very beginning, from a level that probably coming into the role or responsibility, they didn't think that they could do that. It just creates more trust and it creates more responsibility for them.
I was gonna share about the meeting makeover by Priya Parker and Brené Brown, but I think this is a very good way to share it also here because they talked about it in their conversation. Just the question, okay, like what would you want to get out of this meeting? This is what the meeting is going to be about. So even just like have that conversation ahead of time with people would really make a big difference. Even if it's not like, okay, let's build the agenda together, but just have that conversation, give them a phone call. So like, hey, what do you want to get from this meeting? It really go a long way. A lot of people wouldn't really pay attention to meetings, but I think it would really be very, very important. So I personally learned a lot preparing for this podcast, and I hope that I could actually, have good meetings also. I don't want meetings that really suck. Overall, this will make our life as an organization, as a team, but also as leaders, a lot more stable. So the value of good meetings would be a stability.
I was just thinking, the mere fact that you have good meetings within the organization, it grants your org something to look forward to in the future. We already have a good meeting. This is a good start. True. Maybe this can be replicated or built upon in the future. So,
For sure, you don't want your meetings to suck. So hopefully, our principles or the principles that we've shared with you could really help. So we got implementing the responsibility rule, giving them a meaningful role or responsibility, and creating an open and safe space for your team members. And then, of course, remember the tips that Aaron shared with you.
So thank you for sticking with us. And if you want to catch more of our episodes, make sure to follow us on YouTube, on Spotify, or wherever you may get your podcast. Once again, this has been Aeron, and joining me is JR, and this has been Ain't a Boss, the only leadership podcast for highly stressed out students. Peace.
What's up?